All right, let's go to the Big 12, which will probably be the best tournament, or at least the best quality teams involved here. And I'm going to surprise you with some odds, I feel, because I'm going to tell you that the favorite to win the Big 12 is the Texas Longhorns at 3-1.
Whoa.
Kansas plus 350, Baylor plus 450, Kansas State plus 650, same as Iowa State plus 650, TCU 850, West Virginia 15-1, Oklahoma State 30-1, Texas Tech and Oklahoma bringing up the rear at 40-1. And this is Texas and Kansas have they are into the quarterfinals. West Virginia will play Texas Tech in the first round. Oklahoma State will play Oklahoma. Those winners will play Kansas and Texas. And then you get Baylor and Iowa State matched up, Kansas State and TCU matched up in the quarterfinals as well. I'll let you take the lead on this conference. Who is your pick to win, and who is your dark horse who you could see maybe sneaking out of there with this thing?
Well, so again, to review the bids, feel like everyone top six is in. Seven Oklahoma State is a question mark. 8 West Virginia is a question mark, but I think a little bit more likely to get in than the 7 Oklahoma State. Texas Tech at the 9 seed, I think, is probably out at this point, but I'm also not really sure because I feel like none of those teams would really be in, but they got to fill 68 in somewhere. Oklahoma, I think, at the 10 seed is the only team that's going to have to win this whole thing to get in. So there's a lot of, great, not to make this so gross to say, pelts out there or scalps, I guess is another way to say it. For a lot of these teams, I think when I think of a Kansas City, Missouri tournament, as I said earlier, Iowa State's always got a ton of fans there. I feel like Texas will probably have some of the least. Unfortunately, K-State will have a bunch. KU will have a lot. TCU, I'm not expecting. Baylor, maybe a little, but I feel like it's probably a more Midwest-based type of crowd, which I think does matter in these type of things, because if you're getting a point or so in home court advantage in a neutral court event, that's a really big deal and can really be the difference between a referee making a call or you getting some sort of home like loving from a call that might actually get you through to the next round. In terms of getting through here, I think Kansas and Texas being around the same for favorite is interesting. And I think that's a lot based on who they get in their first matchup in the second round. But I don't know. I feel like this tournament, there's so many different ways it can go. And that makes me just want to go even further down the risk curve and get as far as I can to see what the long shot would look like. I think I've kind of fallen out of love with K-State, to say the least. I think TCU, with their incredibly bad 3-point shooting, it's amazing that they're even a tournament team. But I do have a little bit of concern that in the actual NCAA tournament, some of these Big 12 teams might not perform as well because they've done a lot of making themselves look good, beating each other up. I don't think Iowa State, despite a pretty good performance against Baylor this weekend, is really on my list, as I think the Caleb Grill kicking off the team right before the tournament start, something bad must have happened. I didn't hear what exactly that was. I think Baylor's looked like one of those teams that, especially with Keontae George coming back this weekend, wasn't a perfect return for him, but I feel like that's probably a team I want to look at. KU sometimes doesn't take this tournament as seriously as I think they should. But ultimately, it's so hard to pick. Save me here, AJ. I'm struggling.
Well, just looking at the history of this event, there are 5 teams. There's 6 teams that have won this tournament ever, going back to 1997 when the Big 12 was brought together. And one of those teams, one of the 6 that have won it, is Missouri, who's no longer in the conference.
Sure.
The combined wins for the rest, Kansas has 12. The other 4 teams that have won have 11. And of those 11, Iowa State's won 5 of them. You have to go back to 2005 to find a non-Kansas, non-Iowa State, and Texas, who won in 2021 once, one of those 3 winner, and that was Oklahoma State all the way back in 2005. Joey Graham was on that team, just to give some insight on how long ago that was. So this like you said, Kansas doesn't always take this seriously, but it's been their event. It's been Bill Self's event. Iowa State has consistently had strong showings, though Iowa State is a team I want nothing to do with right now for kind of what you mentioned, personnel issues that there's a big cloud of secrecy around for some reason. I'm not saying that like because Baylor's never won this tournament or because TCU's never won this tournament that they can't. I'm just saying it seems like the crowd, and you mentioned Iowa State usually having a good traveling contingency. Kansas always does, seems to play a big role. And with Kansas lined up the way they are, at least in this season's bracket, it's hard for me to go against them. I don't like the Kansas State TCU winner. So it makes me feel like Texas has a good chance to be in the finals. And I've said before, or as I said earlier in this pod, like I like teams in these tournaments that can play in the half court. And that kind of eliminates Kansas. And it leaves me, I think I'm leaning either Texas or Baylor. And the idea that I have to pay the favorites price on Texas, it just takes me out of the discussion. I cannot get my head around that. So I'm gonna say I think Texas can win this tournament, but Baylor at plus 450 is probably the look I would make. Although, again, because Baylor is going to have to play Kansas and the Texas TCU Kansas State winner, you may be better off doing like a money line rollover here because Baylor's not like a long shot at plus 450. So I don't know that there's real value on the board for me here. Unless you think Kansas not being the favorite when they seemingly win every other year is value, or do you see Iowa State being a viable team this year? Do you think the history has anything to do with who can win this thing?
I mean, that history just is giving off sirens in my head that KU at 3-1 seems really, really underpriced. Sure.
Think about Kansas. Think about Kansas. The last forever has been a half court team with a big man. Like they don't have that. They're not that type of team this year. So is this a different Kansas team? Have the Kansas teams in the past been built for the tournament more than these teams are?
I feel like I've had good success just expecting KU to be good, whether they're two big men playing like Bill Self always did, or when he kind of realized that he had to play a 3-point shooting game and changing his style completely, which I think he deserves a lot of credit for. Also having Adidas paying off players or whatever, but that's, I guess, a separate conversation. I think KU, they roll the punches, and at 3-1, I feel like with a pretty big crowd support, not having to see Texas till the final, sure, playing Baylor wouldn't look great in the second round, but I mean, who knows if Iowa State can somehow pull off that upset, that makes it a much easier route than playing Baylor second round. I mean, I feel like the more we talk about it, the more I'm interested in KU just as a 3-1 option. It's probably unlikely that they're going to, I think that price only gets worse on a rollover if somehow Iowa State gets through or there's some crazy stuff that happens at the bottom. And the dominance of Kansas in the Big 12 regular season, plus clearly the Big 12 tournament, despite what I said that sometimes they don't take it too seriously. I guess that's one of the 2 years they did or didn't. I mean, that's, to me, despite being Mr. Longshot over here, that's very interesting to me. And I think, like you said, K-State and TCU have big flaws that I don't think I want anything to do with them on the other side of Texas. Texas is too short. And then the Baylor side having to go through KU, I don't really like either.
Yeah, the Baylor. So Kansas State, TCU, and Texas, these are Kansas's regular season losses, are obviously on the bottom. Baylor and Iowa State both got a win over Kansas, are on the same side of the bracket as Kansas. So if you think that Baylor can get through, or excuse me, that Kansas can get through the Baylor Iowa State winner, you probably feel pretty good about them at least reaching the finals. So I would say, the more I think about it, like that history is alarming, and it's going to be hard for me to not play Kansas, despite the fact that I don't know that this is your dad's Kansas team. But there's nobody who jumps out to me as like great value in this tournament. So the fact that like all the teams that I'm even remotely interested in are under 5-1 makes me think I probably won't have anything on this tournament as far as like a futures bet goes.